Nice to see you, and thank you for agreeing to interview me about my book.
You're
Thank
very welcome. Hope it will be an interesting interview, not just for me, but for you as well.
you. Absolutely.
So I would like to start with the I would like to start by asking you to tell us the full title of the book and when it was published.
Well, first of all, let me show. This is the book, and I will read the title because I'm pretty sure that it's not as easy to see that. It's called Post-Enlightenment Self-Education, and the second title, Toward the Age of Human Dignity. And this was published at the end of May this year, 2025. So let me tell you that it's a little bit, and I discussed that in the book, it's a little bit lazy title about post-enlightenment because there is so postmodern, post-industrial, post-work, post-this, post-that, and it's very fashionable to use that. And initially I resisted that. But there was two reasons why I decided to go this lazy path. One reason is that actually it's reflect. I don't know how other posts reflecting this kind of this what other posts how much they're lazy. By the way, why I call it lazy? Well, before this, spreading of this post mania, the people used to try to characterize things. For example, they didn't call they call it enlightenment. They didn't call it post Middle Ages, which is probably at that time, if our time moved to their time, that it will be probably a very big temptation. Or they called Renaissance and not post Middle Ages. Or Enlightenment did not call post Renaissance. For example, and the people try to figure out like what it is, and that was Renaissance trying to resurrect the antiquity and enlightenment. This is such a wonderful term, making the light, bringing the light that from the dark ages. It's a wonderful metaphor. And now times we have this lazy post. So what's the two reasons? One reason is that it's really post-enlightenment in the sense that it's not trying to be in a position, complete opposition, try to annihilate enlightenment, but rather actually become even more enlightenment than enlightenment itself. That's my claim of this. So in a way, it's moving further than that, but in a way, to a certain degree, in the same direction, preserving as a very good tradition. So it's not trying to throw enlightenment from the ship of modernity. I'm just referring to the very famous revolutionary Russian slogan, like throwing Pushkin from the ship of the modernity, or something like that. So in this case, post, I would claim is it's very appropriate from that sense. And the second one, it's very, and maybe I'm chicken about that. It's very difficult if I put, for example, if I try to create this new metaphor or title for this new age, which I think it's, if you ask me what it might be, it's something to do with the word dignity, with the concept of dignity. In a way, it's a full dignity, at a time of full dignity, rather than enlightenment. So it's a kind of next step from the Enlightenment. It transcends in many ways of the Enlightenment, but nevertheless keeps to the core its humanism. It's not post-humanism. It's even more humanism than, in my view, than Enlightenment arguing for. So So this is about title, and the title has the focus is on education and specifically self-education because that's what it defines. So it also the title is a little bit how to say misleading because post-enlightenment self-education. What about enlightenment self-education? Uh, or I don't know, something else, self-education. In my view, self-education is expression of the post-enlightenment in many ways. So this is again a little bit problem with the title as well. Another problem with the title is this is not my title. This is not fully my title. This is a publishing house title because my title was Manifesto of Post-Enlightenment Self-Education. And it's apparently the publishing house didn't like the word manifesto because it sounds for them it's not a scientific thing, which is I strongly disagree with that. And what was also interesting through the book, the word manifesto still survived, despite survived their editing. So in a way, it's a compromise. They didn't put it in the title, but allowed me to use throughout the book. I claim that book is manifesto, and maybe it is manifesto. It's a little bit long manifesto. It's about 200 pages manifesto, but for if somebody knows my writing, it's a huge achievement because my first book had 500 pages. So I really wanted to have it's a pamphlet. My goal is to write a pamphlet, really. But, I failed miserably because it's not pamphlet. It's a full-scale book. And it's not even, I would not call it short book. But it definitely for you, it's a Eugene's a very short book. It's the shortest book that I ever wrote.
Yeah, I like very much this last comment. It's Eugene's shortest book.
To my defense, I remember there was Hegel, and my memory, I have mature memory, so my memory is fading. But I forgot whom he was corresponding with some French philosopher, and that French philosopher asked Hegel, "Why you are writing so long texts? Your texts are very big. Why couldn't you write like what we do in France? Like we're writing pamphlets, basically." And the Hegel replied with some sounds like a very big annoyance. He said, "My thoughts do not fit short text or French mind." Something like
I
that.
believe Hegel was quite proud to be a German. And I don't think there is any need for the defense from your part because we all here on this earth to self-realize ourselves, and you need to write books, some short, some long, some big, to self-realize yourself, and this is your contribution to the human race, and it's good.
Thank
It's
you.
interesting you were talking about the main title because I had a thought when I read the book, just after I read the book, that if I was an editor in the publishing house that published your book, I would suggest a different subtitle towards a new age of human dignity. Because a great deal of your argumentation, why we need the message that contains in your book, is based on the critique of Kant, Immanuel Kant. And Immanuel Kant was human dignity, as he understood it, was in the core of his philosophy. We can disagree with this. We can have a different opinion about what human dignity is, but he suggested a system, a description that would welcome human dignity and make human dignity the core of it. And it's interesting because I think your book is needed now, because as with several works by Immanuel Kant that were very important for the age that he was writing and living at, we do need to rethink, reevaluate, and rediscover and redescribe what human dignity is now in our age. Because we are not living in times of Hegel or in times of Kant. We live in our own time and in our own room, if you put it. So our time and room coordinates are different from Hegel's and from Kant's. And that's why we need a new thinking about that. And this is what your book provides. I would like to start with the question, with the citation from your book. You write, does post-enlightenment education exist now? Yes, absolutely. It has likely existed since the dawn of humanity. It manifests each time a person notices and appreciates their own learning. It occurs whenever someone designs what they want to study for any reason. It exists when individuals define their own education, its goals, its quality, its curriculum, its instruction, and so on, with or without the help of others. So it's possible to conclude that this book, that is a book about post-enlightenment, is about something that exists independently of us. Mm-hmm. So the question is, what is post-enlightenment education for you?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a very good question. And my answer, it's not, of course, it doesn't exist independently from us. It exists through us. I would not call it independently of us, but through us. And that's both its strength and to some degree its weakness as well. And the weakness, the strength is that it exists, it's unescapable. Like, for example, where is inescapable? It's inescapable in our conversation. Like, for example, you designed that wonderful question that you ask, and this is a part of your self-education because you asking me, and you find there is another part of that. You have this question, and you find the source for the help, for the guidance, which is me. Whether or not you're correct about that or not, it's your judgment will be after that, which is also part of the self-education, how useful will be my answer for you. So you see, this self-education exists everywhere, even in our interview. It's a part of that self-education. Reveal itself, not reveal, persists there. The problem is that we, which is humans and as society and individually or privately, do not recognize that, first of all, it exists and it's great value, and make it in many ways very difficult. Not in our interview. I hope in our interview it will be not very difficult, but outside of this, it's very difficult because we tasked a lot of people to do a lot of things which prevents people to engage in self-education. So self-education almost like can be compared in our times as you know that weeds going through the asphalt, and not only weeds, it says beautiful flowers and whatever coming through that, but it has to be done through the cracks of otherwise system that trying to prevent self-education. And so my call in this book is to recognize, first of all, the power and existential need for self-education, and to facilitate that, to say, okay, we have a lot of hindrance in our society for self-education. Why not we promote that? Instead of resisting that, we will promote that. We create good conditions, favorable conditions for self-education. And this is what basically the book about. Also, it's interesting to think about, you started about our times. I think our times, part of that, through the technological advantages and some other changes, social changes that going on for good and for bad, makes probably this project much more feasible And we can discuss that why. From economic and many other technological point of view and many other points of view, it might happen. It does not guarantee that it happens. So it's not like, it's not a Hegelian idea that, just because there is conditions there, it will come up with almost like by itself. No, it will come through the struggle and efforts and so on and so forth, through the political will, for many other things. But I think it's interesting that I think it become much more relevant now. Like before, it would have been much more a dream than a call for kind of particular actions that might bring that to life. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much. You write that the compulsory education is a result of totalized educational paternalism that the Age of Enlightenment brought. One of your arguments behind the existence of the present-day education is that Enlightenment ideology developed in conviction, which has by now become hegemonic, according to which education is a panacea for all societal and even personal problems. Crime, hate, bigotry, chauvinism, racism, sexism, homophobia, authoritarianism, colonialism, injustice, imperialism, inequality, unwanted pregnancies, poverty, sickness, corruption, health problems, overpopulation, global warming, wars, sadism, ecological problems, and other vices, you name it, can be addressed, remedied, and cured by compulsory paternalistic education. Mandatory classes, workshops, and training are designed and enforced to address social evils and problems. So my question to you then, how should the social evils and problems be addressed from your point of view, from where you stand?
Mm-hmm. In my view, these problems will be addressed from the many ways how legitimate to address them. For example, through the legal system, through the politics, legislation. Sometimes it's happened through the wars, military. Also, like I agree with one of the statements by Mikhail Bakhtin, that Russian philosopher of dialogisms, that dialogue humanizes human life. Sorry for tautology a little bit. And so dialogue, there is a definitely place for that as well. But things like education, another thing is art. It's not a tool for doing that. Yes, occasionally art and education, I intentionally put them together. I'll tell you in a moment why, or probably you have maybe a guess, since we're coming from the same country of the Soviet Union. Both of them can contribute sometimes, time to time, but it should not be viewed as a tool. Like in Soviet Union, arts was considered to be a primarily function of the art is political tool for bringing political change, or basically it becomes a, how to say that, a servant for Communist Party. I'm talking about arts. Education, of course, not talking about that, because education is something almost not like, it's a hegemonic idea that education should serve for making society better. It's the question is, what does it mean better, and how to use education? But on the left and on the right, in Western and non-Western world, people believe that education is the tool for that. This is an Enlightenment idea. But art, it's kind of question. People will like, oh no, not art, not necessarily art. But in communist Soviet Union, that was considered to be a dogma, that art should also serve. Actually, everything should serve to the politics of the Communist Party. So I disagree with that. I think education has its own sphere, and it's not primarily should serve for making society better. Even more, not only is ineffective for that, but it's, how to say that, it's undesirable from the value point of view. The same thing for the art. If particular artists decided to dedicate their life for making society better, I have nothing against that. But demanding that from the art as such, it's a terrible violence against art and against particular artists and who would disagree with this thing. So the same thing about education. If somebody wants to dedicate their education, their personal education for making society better, I have nothing against that. But what I'm against is demanding that it's totalizing that statement. And this is what enlightenment actually does, is totalizing that statement that education, the primary function of education to make society better or to serve even society. That's already, it's a very wrong statement.
Hmm. Can we speak about a particular example? Let's say that we have a violent parent who subjects his or her children to verbal and physical aggression of different kinds. And we have a judicial system that takes care of that. And one of the things that this violent parent has to do is not just serving his time in jail, but also go through the anger management course. So here's an example of education, because the person will be subjected to the education. And the idea about this anger management course is to educate person, or hope to educate person actually, to manage his or her anger in a different way, so that the children in this case will not be harmed, or to do as less harm as possible. So this is an obvious hegemonic position from the point of view of society that assigns this person to that course, to that education. Following your raisonnement, that should not be the case. So if I understand you right, the way forward here, and please correct me if I'm wrong, would be to have this course as the an offer that this person can say yes or no to, but it should not be a demand in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a correct understanding, or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is correct understanding from you. In what's happening now, it's abuse of education. And if you have the analogy of that, we can try to force people, for example, to do certain things or not to do certain things, evil things, even preventive, like, for example, by torturing them. That was in past. And to some degree currently as well, but not accepted. We can not to give them food, and that will be another abuse. This is, in my view, in the row of abuses. The one person who actually very much understood this position was Stanley Kubrick, and his very famous movie, what is called The Mechanical Orange. I think it's an excellent illustration of these abuses, educational abuses and scientific abuses as well. By the way, what I tried to do for people who didn't watch that movie, it's exactly case, Mikhail, that you provided. There is a sadist who organized a sadist group of young men who is terrorizing population, raping women, robbing, which is absolutely, it's a violence for the violence itself, for aesthetics of the violence. I would say this is why it's a sadist. It's kind of engaged in aesthetic violence, almost like. It's not even for the sake, even for satisfaction of other needs of the person. But that's my interpretation. Of course, I could be wrong. We're talking about movie. It's a wonderful art. We're talking about art, interpretation of art. And at some point, he got caught, and he got to exactly, Mikhail, this type of educational programs, mostly based on behaviorism in the case of this movie, but well, you can create some other forms of so-called education, and uh, and program was successful, and you see the success of so-called success of this program, and how it's absolutely twisted in this. What I like about this movie, it shows our twisted Enlightenment desire of mold people in the way how we want people to be molded. And that's why a lot of atrocities in the 20th century, and unfortunately it continues 21st century, done with the label of education. Like in many countries, including Soviet Union, of course, and even Nazi Germany, the concentration camps were called re-educational camps, or in China, for that matter. And you see, the education becomes one of the terrible human crimes that's done. And unfortunately, not very many books written exactly about abuses of education, of educational abuses. And it's because it's our blind spot, because we still so much under shadow of enlightenment, where education is supposed to solve all our problems. In my book, I gave example of the terrible abuse that's happened in my university when young biology male professor was exchanging grades with the his female students for sex. And when he was caught, university actually tried to protect him, that's another story. It's terrible. Until federal government had to interfere. What's the reaction of university? To create mandatory courses for the professors, training professors, to teach them that they should not exchange grades for sex. And I think it's travesty. By the way, of course, I did not participate and resisted very much to this idea because it's abuse and also corruption on so many levels that the whole maybe podcast can be dedicated to really deconstructing that case and cases like that. There is the same thing about anti-racism training and many other things that very spread out in the Western world in responses to the social problems. And I think it's a huge abuse and oppression in itself. An abuse of education and abuse of people who have to.
Thank you very much.
That.
One of the arguments for the new post-enlightenment education, self-education, is the fact that, as you write, the compulsory schools are no longer universal economic equalizers, but universal economic stabilizers of economic and political system that require unequal division of labor and resources. It's actually impossible to disagree with that statement of yours, because we have lots of research in Europe, for example, that shows that the educational system, they actually they do not add to the social and economic mobility, but they actually maintain status quo, meaning that it's mostly, or to a huge degree, children of advocates and children of doctors that would like to get the profession of doctors and advocates and get that. And so education as the mobility elevated as not always function, or function to a limited degree. So the question to you is, should the schools become economic equalizers, or should they encourage economic mobility and social mobility?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that you're asking that question. And the question is about two things. I just want a little bit emphasize that. You nicely pointed out about status quo. So one solution to respond to that status quo, let's improve schools to become more better tools for social and economic mobility. And the question becomes, is it possible to improve schools to become equalizers? Equalizers. That's one question. But I think you're asking a different type of questions, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, which is not whether or not it's possible, but whether or not it's desirable to do that. And or you asking both questions? Can I ask you for clarification?
No, I think you're right. The question is it desirable?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and in my view, I would say it's both impossible and undesirable. But the more important thing is not that it's impossible, but it's undesirable. And it's undesirable because, again, it's based on abuses of educational abuses. It's imagine that, again, the metaphor that I'm trying to use with the food. Imagine that the food will be used for presence of absence of the food to make some important social program to work. So using food as a means for achieving good social outcomes. It's a in itself, it's a very would be considered a very, for some people, including me, very bad idea, even if it can be a successful using food or food deprivation, better to say, for forcing people to, nudging people towards desired social outcome. The same thing, it's abuse of the education because it's divert education from its purposes, its internal purposes to serve something else. And in my view, this is what's the key problem. It's not so much about like, is it good? It's another story. Is it good to have this equalizer in itself? That's another interesting question. But the most important thing is distort education. How it distort human biological well-being when food deprivation is used for achieving some social, maybe very noble social outcomes, but it's done through the food deprivation from the biological, this kind of dependency us on food. And that becomes very important moral problem of using this means for doing that. So the same thing I'm arguing that education is existential need for humans, and using education as a leverage for something else is, in my view, abuse of the education. It doesn't matter how good that something else is, which
It's
is again.
It's very interesting, interesting thought, and I do have comments on that, but I will sort of go with these comments towards the end of the interview. Now I would like us to go to the to another very interesting and very important aspect that concerns your views of education in general. It's possible to characterize you as a follower of Biesta and Säfström. Those are two educationalists who in 2011 published a manifesto for education in a scientific journal where they encourage both educators and education researchers to invite people to start speaking for education themselves. Basically, they were concerned with the fact that the politicians and the elites, they influence educational research too much. So they wanted educationalists and educational researchers get their own voice and start reacting towards the press the politicians put education as sphere to. And for me, your book is one of manifestos that appeared since 2011. And your manifesto is in stark contrast to the Manifesto Education for Change for Education from 2014 that was created by the Council of Europe, as they view the education from the society point of view, first of all. I mean, education, first of all, should serve the society. And it's the needs of the society that are prioritized. But you, in your book, in your manifesto, you prioritize the needs of autonomous individual. And you put autonomous individual, and this is my subjective point of view, over the societal norms even. So is that a correct way to understand you? And why do you prioritize the autonomous individual over the societal norms?
Thank you. There are several questions there, or several, how to say that, statements that I need to respond there. One, thanks, and by the way, thanks a lot for bringing that. That's very, very important. One issue about Gert Biesta, and I extremely respect him, and he's my, I would call, dialogical opponent. No, I'm not a follower of him, although I can see some, how to say, not even similarity, but there is, how to say that? We might have common enemies, let me put it this way, but it doesn't make us friends. In my view, Biesta is a very Kantian person. I think Kant would love Biesta if he were alive, because Biesta is, in many ways, maybe not in all, but in many, many, many ways, realization of Kantian vision. Let me, specifically in that question, because for Kant point of view and Biesta's point of view, the guardians of the education must be not politicians, not state, but educational experts. Kant, in one place in his very short, you see, I envy Kant because he can write very concise, unlike Hegel. He wrote in the very small pamphlet, which called On Education. He discussed three types of education: private education, which is family education. Currently, it will be considered the homeschooling in current jargon, what he called family education. The second type of education is a state education. And the third type of education he considers is public education. He considers kind of value in all three of them. He doesn't say that one should be abandoned, and he sees that. But he prioritizes what he called public education over state education. By the way, in his terminology, what currently we call public education is a state education. And I think Biesta would agree with that. And that's what he actually, in his manifesto of 2011, arguing that actually from the state education should be public education. But the logic of the Kant, which is very close to logic of Biesta, is like that. What's the problem with the state education? The problem with, and the family education as well, homeschooling. The problem is they kind of focused on the particularity of the state. State needs has its own goals like nationalism, militarism, economy, and so on and so forth. By militarism, I don't mean negative terms, just to preserving defenses. It's not necessarily, but some type of offenses as well. So it could be that the negative thing, militarism as well, but it's not, well, Kant did not criticize that necessarily. But many things like cohesion, subordination, and so on and so forth. This is very important goals, and state push for that. And because of that, it forms in the students particular reason. The same thing for the family. Family very much concerned, for example, about social mobility, upward mobility for their children, for example, and that's okay. There is nothing wrong with that, but it's nurture in the students particularism and many other things, particular morality, particular this, particular that. But Kant was arguing that it should be universal. And universality can be achieved only by commitment to the universal value of truth, which as educational experts are. And there also will be cosmopolitan. They would promote cosmopolitan values. And of course, the Kant's ideal is to move to the time when there is no states, national states, or any other states. It's not only national states will be abandoned, and humanity will be one, and there will be perpetual peace because of that. So we live, when you say we're not living in Kantian time, to some degree we do live in Kantian time, but we're living in Kantian dreams of perpetual peace, of doctors without borders, everybody without borders, not only doctors, but everybody without borders. This is a Kantian vision of the world. And BS, in my view, returns back to basics of the Kantian basics and trying to fight that statism, can be called, grabs on the education because it's a state. And the Prussia was the state who was, and Kant was against that. Against in the not sense that there should be no state school, that's fine, but there should be in kind of in minorities. The much things should be public education, not the same thing about family education, or they can be in parallel to each other. But the primary thing should be public education, and public education should be run by educational experts, which is what BS argued. This is very much against my views, which is, it's not because they define education. In my view, education legitimately can be defined by only one person, namely educatee themselves. And that's how I'm different from very respect Biest. And again, I value his writings because, like Kant, because for me, Biest is Kant of our times. He's very precise and very powerful, and he very much against running against self-education. There's a lot of his writing because he is very much afraid. For him, like with any paternalistic education is defined by guidance, by imposed guidance. And he continued this light of the thought that guidance defined education. Without guidance, there is no education. He introduced even term, which is I like, and almost like hijacked from him. It's learnification, which is focused too much on learning and not on guidance. And guidance defines education, not learning. And that's what his argument is. Now, sorry that I'm answering so long because I so love your question, Mikhail, because I really appreciated your question. It's so juicy for me, so I just cannot pass it by and answer. That's why my writing is so long, probably, because I'm having aesthetic pleasure of very interesting challenges and inquiries. So the second part is even bigger than what you asked, because a lot of people saying, oh, you're for autonomous individuals and stuff like that. No, I'm not. I'm against autonomous individual, no less than social norms. Although no social norms, I would say, much more oppressive right now, that idea of autonomous individual. And why is that? For many different reasons. Like, for example, we engage right now, I'm arguing, in self-education. Both you engage in the self-education and I'm engaged in self-education. Why? Because I'm so love many things that I'm saying right now. I'm saying some for the first time because you asked me an interesting question. I'm admitting that. I'm engaged right now in also in self-education. But both you would probably agree with me, but we're not anonymous individual in our interview. We, like you asking question, I'm just like, oh, this is such a great question. I need to reply to that. And this is a terrific question and a terrific opportunity to do that. How can we autonomous individuals in that process? Why is it even called it autonomous individual? like think about that. I ask you to interview me, but you thought about that, considered that, and at some point, for some reason, gave me this gift at accepting that. Are you an autonomous individual? No. Not at all. Am I an autonomous individual? Not at all. I'm completely depending right now on your questions, so your wonderful questions. What we are is, in using Russian term, but let's try to translate it in English one way or another. We're dialogic личность. This is what we are. Another example, if you're going to democratic school where self-education is fully realized, and we can talk about that. What you will see is the last thing you will see there, autonomous individual. What you see assembly meetings when they discuss the common issues. You will see a lot of collaboration there, a lot of dialogue there that's happened on different levels, including in the play and some other things. You will not. One thing that you will not see there is autonomous individual, because they're living together and they're enrich each other, including through the challenges, not only through the doing something nice things, but not doing nice things to each other, and that's part of that their life together. And so I don't know what this, in my view, this is a big trap in English-speaking world, because I don't know, is it true for other languages? In Slavic languages, there is such a wonderful term, личность, which probably means different things in different Slavic countries or communities, linguistic communities, or even within use of the, even in daily life, that word. But what I like about that is away from that, in my view, very oppressive continuum. Individual, by the way, what does it mean, individual? It's almost individual. You don't even need to put the word autonomous, because it is the understanding of what individual is. It is coming from undivided. So it is something that exists self-contained. That's why the word autonomous individual is, how to say that, it's not contradiction terms, no, it's just there is redundancy in that. The individual is always autonomous because it's you cannot divide it. It's self-contained things, and it's in position society, which is kind of a mass. It's abstraction. Where is that society? Who is that society? It's an important abstraction, but it is an abstraction, and they start with this. They constantly say, "Oh, you're collectivist. Oh, you're individualist." Blah, 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 blah. As if it's even each of them impossible in themselves. And that's why I'm not trying to be a Slavic chauvinist, but I had to say that this term is so important. And my suggestion is not to even define that, but start using that, and it will be defined by its use. It's not in between individual and social. It's outside of the stupid, sorry to say that, that's maybe too much crankiness in me. It's of this continuum, of this impossible continuum. Maybe that continuum is important for certain things, but in many things, it makes things more difficult to understand, that reveal things.
Well, it's very interesting because what you suggest now is that we look away from the dichotomy individual vs society or against society. You do not want to have this continuum. So how would you then describe us? We are in the society, through society. What is the relation? If we are not, because if we think about the manifesto that I referred to, for them society is an entity. For you, the way I understand, or what I do not find, is that there is no entity, there is no society as entity. There are other dialogic personalities, people around us with whom we communicate, thanks to whom we develop, make our own judgments, make meanings. So can you describe then this environment that we exist in, as you understand it? So if we have to go look away from dichotomy, individual against society, then what we have?
What again? Let me use the word личность, but let me enact that term so it becomes, or concept, so it becomes understandable not only for you, of course, because you're a native Russian speaker and you definitely understand from the almost like from your upbringing what does it mean. Although, of course, the term личность is polysemic like any other meaningful terms and rich terms or concepts. But by using that, I will do. So one part of this oppressiveness that's coming from this individual or societal continuum, it's about distortion of the human relations. So, for example, one way of thinking about oppressiveness, and this is what I call forced collectivism that's happened, which is very common in Soviet Union and many other totalitarian countries, but specifically with, I would say, Slavic flavor. Because I don't know how much it's in China will be associated that. Like one thing is very difficult coming to a Western world. When I immigrated from Soviet Union, it's what shocked me, as well as many other immigrants coming to Western world. Not even in United States. It's just the Western world. It's surprised that people around you respect your wishes. You don't need to prove them that your wish is legitimate. People expect that just for you saying that you wish something, it's legitimate. By the way, it doesn't mean that they satisfy immediately that, but that fact in itself is legitimate. Like in Soviet Union, and again, I'm not telling you something new, unfortunately, but you experienced like when you ask for something or doing something, the first thing will be asked by authorities, who allowed you? Who told you that it's legitimate to do that? Anything that not sanctioned is forbidden in a totalitarian country. So in this case, you feel that your wishes will be not legitimate, your desire, your inclinations, your dreams, until the authority will sanction them. And my friend and your friend and colleague, Anna Marianovich Shane, told a very revealing story, which is, I would say, happened with many people, and it's happened with me as well. But she told it so nicely that I think her authorship is important for me. When she arrived to the United States, her pathway to the United States was marrying American citizen. It's not like she wanted to immigrate and that's why she did that. No, it's reverse. She married and that's why she came to the United States. And she wanted to be a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania, located next door in Philadelphia. And she, with her husband, American husband, went for, this application process, while her advisor, the person with whom she wanted to work, he said, sure, I'm accepting that. And after this interview, but after that there is that bureaucratic process, and the way how she communicated with bureaucrats, and by bureaucrats I don't mean negative words, with the officers at the University of Pennsylvania, was that she was trying to almost like begging them to accept whatever she was applying. And her husband at some point, it irritated him, so he called her aside and say, why are you begging them? Why are you humiliating yourself constantly? And she said, because this is what I know, because otherwise, this is what I've learned from my country. They will not cooperate with me. I have to put myself down in order to demand that, to ask for that, not demand. It's asking for the favor, almost like personal favor. And he said, this is wrong. they're working to serve you, and they try to help you as much as they can. You just need to say firmly and politely what you want. By the way, you're confusing them because they don't understand what you want. Because you're never saying anyone what you want. You're starting with humiliating yourself, first of all, and she said, I never even tried to do that. So she tried, and she was shocked how helpful the people were. And she said, at some point, she just, without control, she started crying. I was at that point that almost crying myself because I couldn't believe what's happening. This is absolutely opposite to Soviet Union, when you are considered to be, as Comrade Stalin said, as nuts and bolts of the Soviet system. Nuts and bolts do not have their own will until or desires until the authority tells them that it's useful, that you have to have it because it's useful for this machinery. So this is where that probably very extreme distortion happen when these societal norms are ruling. The opposite, of course, is like for me, it's always shocking. I know that it's American or English way of saying that. I'm going in the opposite direction now on the individual side. When Steve Jobs said, at that time, I remember there was an interview that kind of shocked me. At that time, I was worth of $2 billion. That statement for me, I know that it's just colloquial way of saying that he has this amount of the wealth, but saying I'm worth such and such amount, there are several things that kind of negatively resonate in me. One is that putting the word worth to with the amount of the money assigned to that. And I worth such and such, which is, but the other things, he really see that amount of money that he earned as his own personal achievement without any, the word even personal, not the right, individual achievement, without any other people involving in that. And not seeing how much achievement that he did, it's yes, he did this, but other people contributed, and their contribution makes invisible. That discourse of individual discourse makes other people invisible. Let me give personal example. My scholarship is pushing this notion of dialogic sciences and dialogic approaches and dialogic analysis and so on and so forth, and which going against positivism, which is very common in the way how journals, international journals, organize themselves and how they see a value of scholarship. And I realized that in many ways, the scholar that I have become heavily dependent on the editors of the journals that published my work. And most of all, I would say the person whom I very appreciate, and I need to write him a letter, appreciation letter. I know I owe him a lot. It's Jan Walsener for his brilliance and his vision of the things in which my scholarship can be appreciated and granted honor of the being published. I know that I will not be where am I right now, institutionally and otherwise, without Jan Walsener's huge contribution in me. And this is where, and part of his bravery as well, and many other like intellectual achievement, visions, and so on and so forth. And that's part of this appreciation coming from the notion of личность, in my view. Because личность exists only among личность, other личностей, plural. For I put Russian plural личности, but in English it's plural is личностей. I don't know how even pronounce that. That's S at the end. And that's a very important, this appreciation that you in relational in relations that define you, as well as you contributing, as well as you have authorship and that authorship recognized by other authors, like Jan Wassenaar, like you, like many other people whom I really, really like want to say big thanks and gratitude and appreciation, including people who disagree with me as well, because the worst thing is silence and indifference and non-publication in a way, in the metaphorical sense, ignoring otherwise. So in this case, this is why the notion of richness, in my view, is so important and so missing. And this creates such a trap for my Anglo-speaking colleagues.
So we're basically talking about personality that exists thanks and through other personalities. This is the message.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We go on. You argue that the compulsory education is a result of the educational paternalism that does not ensure good education and suggests the educational dignity model as the alternative to the model of the educational paternalism. Can you describe the educational dignity model?
Well, it's very, in my view, this is, in short way, it's self-education. It's dignity means, what does it mean, dignity? Let's focus on that. Like, I have respect, Mikhail, for your dignity when I invited you to this interview, but what does it mean, I respect your dignity? Which means I respect your saying no, and although it may be unpleasant for me, because I'm not, you're saying no making an obstacle in my achievements of certain goals and aspirations and the processes and growth and so forth. But I respect that. It means that I need to, for example, I cannot retaliate you for you saying no in any way. And I should not change our relations in any way. It's not conditional in my view, and you have this freedom and safety and respect from me for your saying no. That's what, in part, not completely, but in part, constitutes this dignity, which does not mean autonomy, but it means dignity. That you can say no, and I respect that. And again, it may be very unpleasant for me, but that's knowing that you can say no, it's in your prerogative, and I should at any point to project any pressure on you. And if there is, it's reversing. I need to remove as much pressure from you saying no as possible. I make it easy for you to say no. And that's a part of the dignity as well. But also dignity in a way for you to define your own life and me respecting that. Yes, at some points, you're defining your life might get into conflict with my defining of my life. That's not a problem. It's not a problem. It is a problem, but it's not how to say. So what? We have to leave that, and then we have to kind of try to solve that problem in many different ways. Maybe, by the way, one way to do that to say goodbye to each other or engage in a war with each other. That's also could be a possibility. But in general, still, it's based on this idea that we have respect for each other definition of our life. By the way, and that accepting this definition and respecting that does not mean that I need to understand your way of life or approve that. That's exactly, neither my understanding is not required, not my approval, of course, not required, because both of them defined what's Philip Petit called domination. Domination, in his definition, is based on the idea that anything that you do or needs my approval. By the way, I can be very so-called liberal in my approval. I can approve everything that you ask me. But that's the very fact that you need my approval for your realization or your life, that means it's domination. And our society heavily based on domination and not recognizing other humans' dignity. So back to the question: what's first of all, the way how you phrase that minus autonomous individuals, of course, would be correct. Yes, it's the vision of post-enlightenment is based on the recognition of dignity of other people, unconditional recognition of other dignity of other people. In terms of education, it's very simple. It's the notion of, in one word, self-education. It's a recognition of self-education, which means you defining whether or not you want to study or not, what's goals of your studies, what you want to study, how you want to study, and so forth, with whom. That's recognition of that legitimacy and support for that. That's what it means. Applying dignity to education.
So if I simplify a question, your alternative is actually you're arguing for places where we can call them schools, places of education that should become places of self-education based on the recognition of human dignity, both own and the human dignity of others.
That's correct, yeah. And of course, self-education does not need to be in schools, but not. And you know, I want always remind the Greek term school. It's a Greek word. It's the meaning of that, even in modern Greek. Although any Greek person, I asked them, it took them a while to make this connection because they always shocked what it means. The word school means leisure in Greek, and it's and if you ask any student in any, well, not any, but many schools, is it school is leisure? They will say no, it's work. And by the way, that's a position that Kant was always provided. And by the way, Kant saw other type of education, self-education. He recognized self-education, by the way, but for him, it's. We can talk a little bit about that if you're interested in that. But for him, it's not peripheral, it's in parallel. And it's very important parallel, but since there is almost nothing for him to say about that except acknowledging that. He called it free education. That should be parallel to schooling. And he called that free education as a leisure. So he really, in Greek sense, defined that. But he said this parallel, they should be in parallel. Another kind of, how to say, outcome of this free education, it's late emerged in Germany, I think it's in Germany or Switzerland, this notion of kindergarten. But it's for little kids. This is not how Kant thought about that. Also, the idea that it's a garden, that there is a gardener behind that, that was very also anti-Kantian, because he really thought about self-education in parallel, which is very painful, and where the kids basically left alone to do whatever. And there's no interference unless something very severe happened. But adults should be completely out of any interference, and it should be not even separation by age, not that at all. Blah, blah, blah. This is that they should be left into their own devices. By the way, why? If you ask why, because Kant saw a big paradox in his project, because the purpose of whole things, it become autonomous individual, right? And that's his term, autonomous individual. Yes, but how come you become autonomous individual through yoke of compulsory education? And he said, which is killing this kindle of autonomy, of agency. And he said, to solve that problem, you should have in parallel something that has this kindle, that keeps this kindle of freedom and self-determination alive. And this is what he called free education.
Well, if we first touch upon the kindergarten, this is actually stems from the other giant of enlightenment, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, because it's Jean-Jacques Rousseau's understanding of human being, how human being should be educated or influence that inspired Fröbel for kindergarten. And it's interesting, but that you pointed out that Kant was talking about this free education as something parallel. It's important. It's actually might be possible to characterize your idea as semi-Kantian, because you, as far as I understand, you agree with this, that there should exist this free education. And of course, for Kant, the another important part of the equation is the Christian faith and God, because for Kantian understanding of education is not possible. It's not possible to describe it to its fullest without pointing out to the moral law and the understanding of relation to God. Let us continue with your arguments. You write that the post-enlightened dignity-based society minimizes and redefines paternalism, affirming individuals to exercise that meta-autonomy, which is defined as the ability to decide when to be independent, dependent, or independent in their actions and decisions. This approach ensures that dignity is respected and upheld in a way that is deeply personal and sensitive to each individual's diverse experiences and needs. From the point of view of the power dynamics, the dignity of any autonomous individual who takes the decision over their lives or over his or her life is prioritized over the dignity of those who have power and leadership responsibility. So why do you think it is the right priority to have? And what is your view on the power dynamics? Do they exist?
Of course, they exist, and it's a good idea to acknowledge that. And by the way, that Enlightenment Enlightenment project is trying to eliminate politics, exactly to eliminate power dynamics. That's its goal. What's the alternative to that? Rational dialogue. For the rational dialogue, we don't need to use power. So in this case, I don't need to use power with you, because if I have a good power of persuasion and you rational individual, rational autonomous individual, so you can come to your own good decisions, and I have power of persuasion, I'm another one. So you provide counter arguments, I provide counter arguments, and so on and so forth. At some point, hopefully, we will come to the agreement. Why? Because of existence from Kant's point of view of universal truth. There is only one truth, and it's universal. So that's why you don't need to have God to come to that. And we will come to the agreement if we're rational people. And that's why we don't need power. I don't need to, you will do what I want to do, not because I force you to do that through the power, or corrupt you in one way or another, or exploit your weaknesses for one way or another, or your ignorance, but because or because of voting, but because you would agree with me, or you change my mind, which is also possible. And in this case, I would agree with you that it's not a good idea to do what I initially planned to do. And so you don't need power. In his ideal, this perpetual peace and this cosmopolitan humanity without states, there will be no politicians. There is not. Why? Because people will be rational and reasonable people. They will do through conviction. This is he called it. I think, if not correct, the Enlightenment age, what he called. And he asked, are we living in Enlightenment age? Of course not. We lived in the age of enlightenment, which means recognition that enlightenment is good. But that enlightenment hasn't reached. When enlightenment become ruling things completely, we don't need to have politics. We don't need to have this policy dynamics. Habermas is like that. There's many people who really like this project, Kantian project, and trying to work towards that. I'm not against among them, and there are some political scientists like Move, I think her name. I always don't know how to pronounce that because she's Belgium, and I don't know. I don't know if her name is French or Flemish, so I don't know how. Well, I apologize for that. Chantine Move, I think, and she is also very much against this idea of elimination politics as ideal. So I think power dynamics will remain. And by the way, people have very idealistic idea about democracy. It's us almost without power. No, the word krasi means power, and power means imposition of will on other people against their will. And that's very important thing. It's just like for the legitimate means, and we can talk about that. So, in my view, power will always play a role in that. And if you talk about where is the power connections with the education, I'll tell you where. Self-education in itself not necessarily relate to the issue of power in itself, but as soon as you start doing that with other people, the issue of power will come. Like, for example, my students, we have discussions in our class, but the topic of discussion is decided by majority vote. So at the end of each class, sometimes at the beginning, we decide what we're going to discuss next time. We have a big list of the topics. That list was developed me, previous students, and the current students. For some classes now, it's more than 100 topics there. And the students make persuasive speeches. It takes a little bit time from the class. Persuasive speeches to arguing their peers to vote on their topic and why it's a good idea to study that and why is it good study to next time. By the way, that involves politics. Sometimes they bribe each other. For example, the bribing could be like that. This time vote for me, next time I will vote for you. Or other type of bribing. Those who will vote for my topic, this is real, by the way, it's not imagined. Those who will vote for my topic, I'll bring food for you next time. And get food. So there is many ways of doing. Or if my friends, if you're my friend, you have to vote for that. So there is a lot of politics. Some of them are kind of. Some people might say legitimate, some not legitimate, like this bargaining, maybe it's legitimate, bribing. Well, it's in eye beholder. By the way, some involved bizarre things, which is not even politics, but like we have a draw. How to decide the draw become interesting question. Sometimes they say, Eugene, you decide that. But sometimes they flip a coin. Some they schedule one after another, and the question which topic will be first. But anyway, this is a democratic way. Also, democratic way of changing our class in many different, for example, to have change timing of our class or change particular practices in our class, to make certain constraints on me, and so on and so forth. This is also done through the democratic process, and it involves power dynamic. And no question about that. And some politics can be dirty politics and some kind of legitimate politics. So there is so many things. And it's very important, in my view, to work as much as possible to revealing this power dynamic. Like, for example, a colleague of mine, very dear colleague of mine from Jim Reed Moodle, co-founder of the Circle School, once called me benevolent dictator, which was very unpleasant for me. And I was like, first it generated a lot of resistance in me. How come? How come I like the word benevolent, by the way, but not dictator? Why is it be dictator? Like, what is it? And then I realized I am benevolent dictator because I have this power to give students freedom, but as soon as somebody giving freedom, somebody can take it out. And I say that I will never do that. But the fact that I can do it that there is this shadow of my paternalistic institution is behind me all the time, and I cannot shake it off. And I need to take it into account, that shadow, whether or not I want it or not. It's a very important, and it's very important reveal first of all, realize for me to see that my shadow, and to share it with my students, and to say, yes, that shadow exists, and you correct to worry about that. Even when I say I promise not to do certain things, well, again, they should not be based on my promise. It should be just impossible. What might make possible, it's my institution. Like, for example, there is no way I can do certain things that I can do on my students that I can do to you, Mikhail. And the difference is not in something between us. It's because there is no shadow behind us in our relationship. But in my relationship with my students, there is that shadow. And whether or not we want it or not, and that has to be taken into account and reveal that and deal with that and so on and so forth. But it's important issue. Thank you for bringing that.
Yeah, and thank you for acknowledging what in research methodology is called reciprocity effects. I mean, the shadows always has its effect. Our being as we are, whom we represent, always has its effect on those we're working with, whether we want it or not. Let us continue with the position of an educator. You write that in post-enlightenment, the expert primarily commits to the fiduciary relationship with the client, aiming at informing the client so that the client can make an informed, autonomous decision about what is good for them and how to achieve this good, regardless of how much the expert agrees with the client's ultimate decision. The client ultimately judges the usefulness of the expert. The fiduciary relationship is mostly voluntarily and conditional on the client's consent. This is a citation from you. Is this position always possible? Are there instances where an educator needs to take the leadership and take the decision for the educatee, for example, when the survival is at stake?
Thanks a lot. By the way, this is my, if you ask me, Mikhail, where is my current thoughts are and current research, this is the issue there. This is the hot issue there. I'm trying to figure out boundaries of legitimacy of educational paternalism in self-education and also in fiduciary relations as well. So one place I found, which is easy, it's a low-hanging fruits in a way. It's not very complicated now, but it took me a while to discover that. Thanks to my students, by the way, I completely credit for this discovery to my students, and dialogue that's happened, fortunately, was recorded with my students. That's something that I called it auto-paternalism. There is a very good anecdote, and I just want to share it. I know that it takes time for that, but it's so good. It was last day of the class. One of the classes was small class with undergraduate class about urban education. And I was actually absent from that class for 2 weeks. Not completely prior to that class, maybe 2 or 3 classes before, because I was teaching in China. And I asked the class whether or not they want me to find substitute for me for these 2 weeks or not. And they say, no, we want continuous self-organizing. And they basically... And by the time when they came back, they have a firm organization, which was different from what was before. And I thought it's very interesting organization. So they elected one person for each class ahead of that to lead the class. And so you can now understand that, like, basically why it should be me always. So they and the person had prepared, and the way how to start the class, that person was leading to discussion, like what's happened. We met once a week. So what happened for that week? It was like short discussion. As I said, there was like 6 students were there in class, very small class seminar. And on that day, it was me who was selected. That was last day of the class, and just by chance, it was selected. It was my turn to lead the class on that day. So I asked like how what's going on, and one student, she was African American student, and she started. By the way, it's December. This is a very short day, big night, and she started telling about how her day started. It's very depressing. She has to work before her classes start, and she went to the Wawa, which is a small convenience store for to buy coffee, and she looked at adults. I really liked. She was for 22 at least, and she calling adults. She still considers herself not adult, which is very interesting. And she said she looked at them and thought, "Wow, this will be the rest of my life." Very depressing, by the way. Because and then she turns to and then she starts thinking, on the top of that, I start thinking about all this, excuse me, English, but this is the quote, all these fucking assignments they have to do for all this for all these classes, stupid classes. And I said, do you include our class in that or not? And she said, yes, I will include our class. And I said, wait a minute, why are you saying that? Because you can choose, even now, uh, in my classes, they have a different pedagogical regimes. One of them, prisoner of education, is just get A and leave the class immediately. Don't do anything for that. Or there is a self-education, self-designing syllabus when you can design and not have any assignments of that, or you have your own assignments, and so on and so forth. Like why you choose all opening syllabus? In this case, I'm designing the class with a lot of degrees of freedom, and there is more responsibility for changing how the class run on them. And she in that type of regime, which involved main learning project in the class. I'm not going to discuss what main learning project is, but you will understand from that, from our following things. And she said, are you not just trusting yourself, your own decisions? And she thought for a moment and said, yes, it's maybe true that I'm not trusting my own decisions. And then she stopped. No, she said, I'm trusting my own decisions. And what my decision is, I choose you to force me to study what I dream to study. All my years in the Delaware University, 4 years in the college, this is my last semester. She said, I wanted to do a project to study school prison pipeline for minority students. She's a minority herself. And I never was able to do that. And now I had this opportunity. But without you forcing me to do that, I would not do that because I will switch all my efforts and time to those other classes that I don't care about. So I make that decision that I will voluntarily submit to your power and to your abuses with your grading system and all these drafts and all the deadlines. Again, she used F word for that. But to achieve what I want to achieve. Yes, and I will bitch about that. And you have to tolerate that. And why? I know that you don't like to do that, what you're doing, but I ask you to do that. But you have to do it because you're a professional educator. If you don't like that, get out of this profession. She was very straightforward. And I thought, wow, this is terrific. She explained to me what it is about. And that's what I call auto-paternalism. It's very conditional. It's paternalism because I'm designing assignments, I'm putting all these deadlines, I'm putting all these grades, but she gave me a conditional consent for that. At any time when it stopped being useful for her, she can withdraw that, and she knows that. But I have to force her. I have to create certain pains and certain anxieties in her, and this is part of this our in a way contract. But the contract is completely controlled by her at the end of the day. So this is what I call meta autonomy in that sense, because she still it's meta self-education because she still control the packet control stakes of this. And this is easier fruit because again there is a consent base. There are certain things in fiduciary relations, the assumptions is that I'm serving the client, right? But sometimes client doesn't know what's good for them themselves. And in this case, my goal is not to think what's good for them and then enact with that. No, my goal is to, as fiduciary educator, to help them to figure out what it is, to give the options to figure out. And sometimes it's required things that not necessarily consented. So not any step of my action has to be consented. So why? Because the students, like this particular student even, she talked about that. She gave me a certain amount of credit that I can use, carte blanche to do things, because she doesn't know is it good for her or not. She wants to experience and then she will judge that. And that carte blanche, I have to use that or credit very careful, because when I'm not meeting that, I'm start losing that credit to the point, if I lose it completely, the students say goodbye. I don't think you're useful for me or helpful to me. So I should help each time I'm doing something that really would be appreciated, my credit increases. Each time I'm failing to do that, it's decreasing. And I should be aware of that. And this is part of the fiduciary relations. So can be paternalism, education paternalism, part of fiduciary relations? Yes, but it's subordinated to this fiduciary relations. And again, I'm still trying to find boundaries of that and legitimacy to that. This is a very important thing. But I don't think the goal of fiduciary relations to purify itself from any paternalism.
Thank you very much for your answer. In this book, you have developed described 5 types of self-designed education. Can you walk us through these 5 types?
Yes. Just one correction, not self-design, but self-education. Mm-hmm.
Self-education,
Because,
yes.
yeah, self-design education is only one part of that. The first one, which is autodidact, usually commonly called. Again, auto means self in Greek, I think, believe. And didact means guidance, self-guiding. And self-design is self-design guidance. And that's happened, and people can do it. They study themselves, they set the goals, and also they study themselves. If you carefully, of course, look on that, what does it mean self? They study self. Of course, they not completely study by themselves. They study with non-present others. Like, for example, they looked at the internet, or they looked at they read books, they looked at the videos, and so on and so forth. So they study from other people as well, but these other people not present there. And sometimes there is a lot of things that they can study themselves through kind of trials and errors or discovery things, or they're trying to engage in something and see and learn from that. That's also happened. I'm not saying that it's that self-directed education does not exist. It does exist, but it's always contaminated by it. The more you put under microscope that self-directedness, the more you start seeing others. And this is why Lichность is so good about that, because Lichность is appreciating that rather than trying to purify this, purifying its own authorship. There is nothing wrong to appreciate other people who contribute in your authorship. In a way, authorship is based on transcendence of the given, but that's given usually created by other people. And you always, in a way, standing on the shoulders of other people, even when in autodidact. But still, it's heavily based on your, like, a lot of chains of decision making that you're doing yourself. And again, with hidden presence of other people. Let me put it that way, because it's impossible to do it in vacuum. There is no vacuum. That's why there is no individuals. Individuals does not exist in that sense. So this is one type of this. Another what I call sim deduct, sim meaning together, which is you can do it with peers and people do it in the groups. In my classes, actually, I had situations when people generated groups and they meet outside of the class because they don't want me to be there. And they study just together and there is nothing wrong about that. And they self-organize there. They find also democratic ways of making decisions, sometimes and also which involve power dynamics, some of them legitimate, some can be less legitimate, and so on and so forth. The third way of doing that, it's actually studying from advisement of other people. So it could be professional educator, but could be not. So in a way, it's a kind of autodidact, but not completely, because you're asking for advice. You not always ask for kind of guidance, direct guidance. So it's kind of strategic decisions. For example, you can ask as advisement, like, where can you give me advice or where can I read about, I don't know, Bakhtin? How I should start like learning about Bakhtin? Like what book you would recommend to me to do that? So it's kind of advisement, or how I kind of organize something that I want to study myself, or where I find resources for that, or how should I use these resources, and so on and so forth. So there is no such immediate guidance, but it could be advisement. Of course, the boundary between guidance and advisement not as straightforward and always clear cut as I said, but there is nevertheless such thing as advisor versus guide or teacher or educator in that sense, or educators in broader sense. Of course, the other way of doing that is with the teacher, with guide, when you kind somebody and say, please teach me about this and this and that, or help me to learn about this and that and that. And in this case, that's another form. And the fifth form is about what I call auto-paternalism, which is completely different because with the guide, you're asking for help and with the questions, particular questions, but you're not saying organize the whole thing for me and also force me to study. That's very important part of the difference between studying with guidance of some educator versus auto paternalism, which is a different things in itself. And of course, there could be some hybrids of these fives in different forms of this. So when I say the five, it's not that one can be very strongly separate from another, and it could be they could do in parallel or dynamically. It's like one going to another, and so on and so forth. Like, for example, my students saying that a lot of times, although we can study together something, they go and explore something by themselves with their friends outside of class or their parents or some other things. They do even experiments, interesting experiments, surveys, and they bring us to the class the results of that. So there could be many combinations of these forms, and maybe there are six forms, but I just don't know, and maybe somebody will bring us the sixth form. So far I found five of self-education, but it could be more than that.
Thank you very much for your answer. The next question was actually, I made this next question as a form of note to you. I know that you're interested in the artificial intelligence and how this can be used in educational practice. So in the chapter 7 of your book, you're listing up 41 points to illustrate what the post-enlightenment concept of self-education is about. So I used the Microsoft Copilot and asked the Microsoft Copilot to simplify these 41 points. And the following answer was received. We have here 10 points. Your concept of self-education has been called by the Copilot as education that is personal, dialogic, and rooted in human dignity. The first point is you are the boss of your own life and learning. Everyone has the right to decide what, why, and how they learn, no matter their age or background. The second point is true education comes from within. Real learning happens when you reflect on your own experiences and insights. That's why all genuine education is self-education. The third point is learning is constant and personal. We are always learning and gaining insights, even if we do not notice it. These shape how we see and feel about the world. The fourth point is education is about making meaning. You decide what your learning means to you. This decision often happens through conversations with yourself and others. The fifth point is education is flexible and ever-changing. You can change your mind about what you've learned. Education isn't fixed, it evolves. The sixth point, you can learn alone or with others. The seventh point is no one should control your learning. When someone else decides everything for you, it's not real education. If you ask for guidance, you can always change your mind. The eighth point is education is diverse. People learn in different ways and value different things. Society should support this diversity, not force everyone into the same mold. The ninth point is assessment and credentials should not define education. Tests and diplomas shouldn't control or limit learning. Education is about personal growth, not just proving something. And the final 10th point is educators serve, not control. A teacher becomes a true educator only when their help is appreciated by the learner. Their role is to support, not dominate. So my question to you, is this 10-point simplification correct representation of your view of the post-enlightenment self-education?
Interesting to think about that. But I noticed a few things, and I just want to share about, which is on one hand, I was thinking, oh, wow, it's possible to, how many I had? I forgot how many I had. Like
you had 41 points.
41 points, and they make it 10. Wow, I should have used artificial intelligence in that. And then I started thinking, oh, there is a reason why I stopped using 41 and I'm using 10. By the way, what does it mean why I'm using 41 and it's using 10? I'm just thinking about that. From the logic point of view, it's just like I could hear voices of others that I need to address. And that this is, of course, doesn't see any voices and trying to see patterns there. And that's why we have a different goals. But many things that I hear there, it sounds correct, but it feels like, but not completely. One thing is so much focus on learning, which is, in my view, learning is not equal to education. And education is not equal to learning. Let me just take on one point because there is some other things that kind of how to say that kind of generate some kind of resistance in me. I don't know what's the right metaphor. So learning and education. Well, the thing is about that. Usually in paternalistic education, learning and education is the same thing. And they talk very quickly from education to learning. Why? Because in a way they control education. And what does it mean they control education? The difference between learning and education is the following. In my view, that's learning is first, it's always happened. This is not I'm talking. This is I can hear the voice of Jean Leif, which is one of the founder of sociocultural approach in social sciences, together with other people, and she was making a very important point that we actually in the flow of learning. Learning is non-problematic in that sense. Appearance of the learning is non-problematic. What problematic is what the hell we learn. And that's interesting. In paternalistic education, it's always opposite. The presence of the learning is, or absence, is problematic. Did Mikhail learn how to add fractions or not? That's the question. The question of learning the content of that, which is learning fractions, is not problematic from conventional education. Why? Because it's imposed on schooling. Because I'm talking, when I'm using about, Mikhail, your case, I'm thinking about as a student in the school, of course, which is curriculum is defined by the educational experts, by politicians, by parents, whatever, whoever, by authority. They define that. And that's why it's not problematic. And what does it mean they define? You need to learn additional fractions. It means they put a hugely positive value on that. They make that action, which is invisible to them, because they just say, this is a good learning, and everybody needs to learn that. Everybody needs to learn algebra. Not everybody needs to learn how to do ballet, for example, but everybody needs to learn algebra. And that's action of putting value on the learning is education. So making the judgment of what learning is good for you or not good for you, or neutral, or maybe anti, maybe it's harmful for you, that's the act of that judgment is what makes learning an educational or not educational. And that's why paternalistic education robs people from their education, because the only legitimate person who can make that judgment is the person who experiencing that learning. They make that. The other people also can make that judgment, but their judgment is, in that sense, it's not educational, because it's their judgment of that. And it's only about you when you're making that judgment about yourself, about that. Either past learning, present learning, or future designed learning, when you're designing learning for yourself. But when you're designing that, you need to make this first decision, what's good for you, that you're designing learning that will be good for you. By the way, you can change your mind later on. That's okay. That's why education is ephemeral. That's one of the things that really, I think, Copilot missed that point somehow, and like there are some other points that missed. And by the way, why? Because of the voices that I need to reply to other people, voices that live in me, and I have to address them. And this is what's an important point to make. And also, I want to have opportunity to say big thank you to my colleagues, sociocultural colleagues from whom I'm learning, without whom I could not make this point about that. Also, the one point that is not present at all in that list is another part of the education, non-learning education, which is or education based on non-learning, which is called insight. And unfortunately, our civilization, our kind of modern civilization, completely lost notion of the insight as important one, and it used to have it. Like all cultures, if you find notion of insight, and now it's lost. What it lost, it's about a culture of insight, or even pedagogy of insight, how to promote insights. It's completely lost. This is what I claim. You will not find much discussion in pedagogical literature about insight, especially in the schooling. It's just absent. But I just want to make another point that it's not on the list. In my view, it's very important. It's very heavily present in life, but it's just not become a part of the culture, which is used to be in all societies on which, like European societies, on which so-called modern Western civilization is based on. All that society had notion of insight in different names, like revelation. There is a lot of religious ideas of that insight, but not on eureka moment and so on and so forth. But all of that completely got lost. It's heavily elaborated in like religious tradition or not religious tradition, like Buddhism, for example, of how to promote this notion inside. There is a pedagogy behind that. It's very interesting. One of my projects at some point to get in the history of that and try to find pedagogy of inside to revitalize that and to push forward on that. But that's another thing that's missing.
Well, thank you very much for the answer. I think you're right. There is not much discussion in the educational pedagogical literature on the insight, but there is lots of discussion on some types of insight in the psychological literature. For example, when we talk about observational learning, so there is quite researched area, and some other types as well. We moving towards the end of our interview. One of the last questions that I formulated for you was: do you plan to implement your theoretical views on the post-enlightenment education and practice? And now I realize from your answers that you're actually practicing this post-enlightenment education already. It's not something that you need to put into. So I would like to reformulate this question in the following way: do you plan to extend the practice of this post-enlightenment education?
Extend, well,
or practice it in a different way, in a different area.
Yes. I think I understand what you're saying. If not, please correct me because I might go in some other ways. There is two kind of big areas that I'm trying to work on currently. One, it's at my work, which is I'm teaching, and I'm trying to bring this idea of post-enlightenment self-education in very hostile territory. I should be careful to say it's very hostile. That's because it's among many hostile places. It's probably least hostile in the place of my work. But nevertheless, I should recognize that I'm in conventional paternalistic institution. My students do not choose me. I'm their teacher because institution told them that I'm their teacher, not because they choose me. So our relationship is extremely distorted from the beginning. Their presence in my classes is very distorted. And so I work at a very distorted place when I try to bring that education or post-enlightenment self-education. On one hand, it's sometimes I really sick and tired of that, and I said, well, I want to retire to move away from that. On the other hand, it's very exciting exactly because in that I'm in very difficult conditions to work with, because many things reveal that because the boundary become very clear, and to some degree it is exciting to go against the stream, despite the fact that sometimes it can be also tiresome and very nerve-breaking and scary and so on and so forth. On another hand, I was really trying to, thanks to you, by the way, trying to experiment with post-enlightenment self-education at wild when I'm not have to go against the stream. I'm talking about specifically like a very interesting event that grandfathered by or no, not grandfather. It should be called what's the right godfathering by Mikhail, which is yesterday we had first time our Dialogic Pedagogy Society summer course on a topic that actually Mikhail correctly predicted that would be most popular, which is dialogic analysis versus discourse analysis. We had near 20 participants there for the Zoom, and it worked. I was like, it was terrific in my view. Worked very well. We'll see what other people say. This is like very solipsistic for me to say that, because we'll see what other participants say that, because we just send them feedback survey, anonymous feedback survey. We'll see that. So I'm trying to experiment with that, what I call also university of students, which is, I'm not sure, running well, but maybe it is. Sometimes it's I might have wrong expectations, which is creating a lot of a system of the clubs, different clubs. They exist, and some of them exist for almost 30 years, like our book club, for example, on educational literature. So like things like that. I'm also very much interested in democratic schooling and see how it is going on for K-12 students. But I'm mostly observing that and participating with my colleagues who is active educators there. And we constantly exchange our things. So yes, I'm thinking about that. Also, it's very interesting to observe how many things happened. Like at Wild, there is many projects that exist and people doing them in different areas, from politics to some other endeavors like leisure, new organization of new leisure endeavors, and so forth. So I'm very much interested in that, and in my view, it's very exciting. And also, I'm working with AI. I'm actually just want to brag a little bit. I hope that I'm not the first person, but maybe I am. I created AI teaching assistant for my class. And I tried to find it before, and I couldn't find this idea on internet. Maybe I didn't look carefully enough, but I'm very proud that I designed this teaching assistant who will answer students on questions about our class based on our documents. What I really like that it's really can summarize certain things. But what I like about that, and it's part of the prompt that I included in designing this AI teaching assistant, it's always when students ask about simple questions like when's our deadline, it's actually elaborates why, even if they don't ask it. It's very in very short form, much better than I would done that. Being stylistic Hegelian.
Thank you very much for your answer. And it's very nice to know that my godchild is doing well.
Thanks a lot, by the way.
You're
And
very welcome.
please provide more ideas like that, and don't be shy. And the plus of this idea, you know that I didn't burden you for working on that. I didn't tell you initiative is punishable, so you suggested be part of that. No, I didn't tell you. I appreciate you just saying, kind of, why don't you do this? And I thought, why don't indeed?
Thank you very much. My last question in this interview is, are there any questions that you want to be asked in connection with the main message of this book that you have not been asked by me?
You know what, Mikhail, I prepared actually. I will tell you that I prepared question that I really want to address. But even Mikhail asked you asked me that question because the question was like, "What is your big struggle?" And my big struggle is to right now to, in practical way, in theoretical way, to think where is the legitimacy of the educational paternalism in this post-enlightenment project, and especially in the paternalistic, embedded in paternalistic institution. And this is where I'm struggling with that. But we discussed that. So one thing that maybe I just mentioned, one important things that we didn't discuss, but I think it's important. It's a lot of people, including Biest and many others, they constantly decide what is education, what's the purpose of education, and so on and so forth. And with my project, it's very important to emphasize that this is a trap of paternalistic education. That answering that question is a trap. Why? because the only person who can legitimately answer that question is the educatee themselves. Because as soon as you define that, like for example, people say education is about deep learning that's involved exploration and stuff like that, and not kind of mechanical instrumental learning. Why not? In my view, when people ask how remote control works, which meaning not how it communicates with the TV, but what button I need to press so I can switch like between channels or switch between streaming channels or change the volume or make it mute. I don't see anything wrong with that type of instrumental shallow learning. Why? Because it serves purposes of the educatee who does not need to know right now, and not interested about how this device communicates with another device, seemingly without any medium in between. Well, of course, there is a medium, but it's invisible, but and so on and so forth. So the defining education should be this kind of task. It should be recognized as paternalistic. It's a birthmark of paternalistic education, including like Socrates. Unexamined life is not worth living. Great, terrific for some people at some time, but in another time, maybe not. And again, it's not our legitimate role to impose on the students what's the goal of education should be for them.
Mm. Thank you very much for answering my questions, and thank you very much for writing this book, because it provides a very important and very timely dialogical provocation for everyone, both educators, educationalists, and educatees. I hope that this interview will inspire people to read your book and make up their own mind.
Thank you, Mikhail, for first of all agreeing on that interview, but second, for absolutely marvelous and genius questions that you ask me, and I couldn't believe that I could find a better interviewers than you for doing that. It's a very deep, provocative, and thoughtful questions. Thanks a lot. Also, I want to invite our viewers or listeners to raise the comments, questions, disagreements, excitements in response to that interview. And we might have a follow-up of discussing your questions, comments, disagreements, excitements, and so on and so forth. Everything depends on you. And just want to tell you that there is no such thing as a stupid questions. Stupid questions are extremely welcome, or stupid comments. No offensive one, please, but and by offensive one, I means just non-dignifying. If you think there's something not dignifying, maybe not. But everything dignifying yourself and us are welcomed. Thank you very much. And thanks, Mikhail. Bye.